The courtroom was silent. Not the reverent kind of silence, but the strained, suffocating stillness that only comes when the air is thick with unspoken truth. Oprah sat alone under the fluorescent lights, her hands folded, her back straight. No script, no cue cards, just her voice, calm on the surface but edged with something far deeper, fury restrained by dignity. Her eyes never left the judge. She wasn't here for drama. She was here for reckoning. Every word she spoke felt like it had been pulled from a wound. No sensationalism, no theatrics, just truth, sharpened to a blade. In a tone millions have come to recognize as nurturing and wise, she now wielded it like a weapon. Not against the system, but against a man who built an empire on charm, illusion, and fear. Cut 2, the contrast couldn't be more brutal. Grainy handheld footage at a mansion in Miami. Champagne explodes from green glass bottles. Diddy, wrapped in designer silk, dances on a rooftop, laughter echoing through the night like he owns the sky. The room is full, but no one looks in his eyes. Not really. They toast, they cheer, but there's something else beneath the glamour. A tension, a secret. And in the middle of it all, the storm that's been brewing is finally about to break. This documentary contains discussions of alleged abuse, manipulation, and emotional trauma involving real individuals in the public eye. Some content may be distressing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The screen fades to black, a heartbeat, then a single line pierces through. When Oprah speaks, the world listens. But what she said about Diddy changed everything. For over 4 decades, Oprah Winfrey has stood as more than just a media figure. She became a cultural axis, a force around which millions oriented their beliefs about healing, empowerment, and truth. She wasn't just a talk show host. She was a confessor of pain, a midwife of hope. From the soft glow of a television studio to the highest offices in the world, Oprah moved with a gravity that demanded reverence. She survived poverty, abuse, and racism, and transformed her story into a global platform of empathy. When she spoke, people leaned in. When she cried, the world cried with her. And when she gave, whether a car, a scholarship, or a second chance, she gave like someone who knew the weight of being forgotten. Footage flashes by, Oprah embracing a weeping survivor on stage, sitting across from Barack Obama as he confesses his fears before running for president, handing the keys of a brand new car to a single mother in the audience. Her voice, warm and unwavering, echoes over the images. You are not broken. You are becoming. It wasn't just television. It was transformation. She built an empire on authenticity, a billion-dollar legacy rooted not in scandal or spectacle, but in radical vulnerability. And yet, even she wasn't immune to the shadows that swirl behind fame. Sean Diddy Combs was a different kind of legend. If Oprah embodied healing, Diddy mastered hype. Known to some as Puff Daddy, to others as the king of bad boy, he was the architect of modern hip-hop opulence, a self-made mogul who turned street hustle into champagne dreams. The image, untouchable. The reality, infinitely more complicated. Clips flicker. Diddy walking red carpets in diamond-studded suits, hosting all-white parties in the Hamptons, his name whispered in boardrooms and blasted through subwoofers. He launched the careers of artists like Notorious B.I.G. and Mary J. Blige, changed the sound of a generation, and amassed a fortune doing it. His energy was electric, unstoppable. But behind every meteoric rise lies a darker gravity, a hunger that can swallow those closest to it. They weren't friends in the traditional sense, but they shared stages. Gala photos show them smiling side by side, appearances at mutual industry events, a veneer of mutual respect. Oprah praised Diddy's business acumen more than once. Diddy lauded her influence, even hinted at wanting to be the male Oprah in interviews. 2 empires, 2 icons, orbiting each other. But somewhere behind the lights and applause, that orbit fractured. And years later, when the silence broke, the distance between them wasn't just professional, it was personal. Devastatingly so. ChatGPT said, Oprah Winfrey's origin story is not made of glitter. It's carved from bone-deep struggle, soaked in the red clay of Mississippi, and marked by the kind of silence that only children forced to grow up too soon understand. Born in 1954 to a teenage mother, Oprah was raised in poverty so raw that she often wore dresses made from potato sacks. The world didn't make room for a dark-skinned black girl with a loud voice and big emotions. So she carved space with the only weapons she had, her mind, her pain, and her presence. Behind the camera-ready smile was a girl who had been molested by relatives and family friends before the age of 14. She ran away. She lost a child at birth, and still she rose, not in spite of her trauma, but because she dared to turn it inside out and speak it aloud. Her voice, once silenced by shame, became her salvation. By her 30s, she had transformed the talk show format into something sacred, a public altar for private pain. The Oprah Winfrey Show wasn't just entertainment, it was a national confessional, a mirror, a movement. She taught the world that wounds could be wisdom, that survival could be currency, and that truth, especially hard truth, was power. Diddy's rise decades later came from a very different hunger. Born Sean Combs in Harlem in 1969, he was just 2 years old when his father was murdered in a drug-related shooting. That loss didn't just leave a void, it ignited something. By the time he landed an unpaid internship at Uptown Records, Diddy was already in motion, relentless, magnetic, and calculating. He didn't wait for doors to open, he kicked them down. He threw lavish parties that doubled as industry traps. He made sure the right people were watching, listening, whispering his name. By 24, he launched Bad Boy Records. By 26, he was walking red carpets with Biggie Smalls. His life became a blueprint for the hip-hop mogul, part businessman, part myth. He was the beat behind the music, the shadow behind the spotlight. But beneath the swagger there were cracks, flashes of volatility. Lawsuits settled quietly, stories that disappeared faster than they surfaced. If Oprah's empire was built on truth-telling, Diddy's was built on spectacle. And their world, though wildly different, inevitably collided. Not in person at first, but in influence. As Oprah invited survivors of abuse to speak openly on national television, Diddy was hosting parties that blurred the lines between celebration and control. While Oprah was spotlighting self-healing and inner transformation, Diddy was curating a universe where image was everything and silence was bought with status. Their ideological clash was unspoken, but real. Oprah's platform demanded accountability. Diddy's demanded loyalty. Her empire was grounded in confession. His thrived on secrecy. Whispers began early. Lawsuits filed by employees citing unpaid wages, artists claiming manipulation, women hinting at coercion behind closed doors. But the media, enamored with his power and showmanship, rarely lingered on the darker rumors. If Oprah's pain had been consumed with empathy, Diddy's alleged cruelty was consumed with curiosity, then quickly forgotten. At industry events, they kept a respectful distance, smiles for the cameras, waves, but there was no warmth in their orbit, only gravity, pulling them toward a reckoning that neither of them could have predicted. Because behind every success story lies a shadow, and some shadows refuse to stay silent. It started in a place that, on the surface, looked like paradise. A private estate in Beverly Hills, the kind of house where the curtains are so thick they swallow sunlight, where the air smells like imported incense and $2,000 a bottle champagne. Oprah had been invited before, not often but enough to understand the rituals. The hush-hush guest list, the no phones beyond this point rule, the security that looked more like military detail. But this time, something felt different. She arrived quietly, not in her usual press-covered manner. No cameras, no entourage, just her and a driver, slipping through iron gates into a world of wealth so obscene it bordered on surreal. Inside, the music pulsed low, almost hypnotic. Diddy, dressed in white, moved through his guests like a king among loyal subjects. He greeted Oprah with open arms, a curated smile, and a cocktail named after himself. She accepted the drink, but not the performance. What happened behind those doors that night has never been confirmed, but what's been whispered is enough to haunt the edges of the truth. Oprah didn't stay long, less than 40 minutes, according to someone on staff. When she left, her expression was unreadable, blank, but not empty, shaken, but holding it in. The next day, she canceled a panel where Diddy was scheduled to appear. A week later, she cut off all communication with him. No statements, no explanations, just silence. Then came the lawsuit. In late 2023, the world shifted when singer Cassie Ventura, once the fresh-faced prodigy under Diddy's label, filed a bombshell lawsuit that sent tremors through the music industry. The allegations weren't vague. They were surgical in detail. Years of manipulation, coercion, surveillance, and abuse. Cassie claimed Diddy controlled her every move, her phone, her clothing, her career. She spoke of emotional warfare, violent episodes, and a lifestyle that looked like freedom but felt like a cage. The case sent shockwaves, not just because of the severity, but because of the corroborating whispers that followed. Other women began to speak, some with lawyers, others behind closed doors. Stories that mirrored Cassie's began to form a pattern, a mosaic of intimidation, silence, and luxury used as leverage. And somewhere in the background was Oprah. Sources close to her say that Cassie wasn't the first woman to confide in her. Over the years, Oprah had received emails, calls, survivors who saw her not as a media mogul, but as the only person with a platform they trusted. She listened, she comforted, but until Cassie came forward publicly, there had been no hard evidence, no lawsuit, no spotlight bright enough to expose what lived in the shadows of Diddy's empire. Still, something had already broken for Oprah. That final night, that party, wasn't just a turning point. It was a line she couldn't uncross. One source, a producer who had worked with both parties, claimed that Oprah had received a call days before the event. A warning. Someone from within Diddy's inner circle reached out. Not with accusations, but with a quiet plea. Watch carefully. Don't just look. See. And she did. What she witnessed has never been made public. Some say she saw a young woman in distress, trying to leave, only to be quietly escorted back inside. Others mention a hidden room, a VIP suite, where guests were selectively chosen to enter. Oprah wasn't among them, but she saw enough. Enough to understand that this wasn't just another celebrity party. It was something else. Something darker. After that night, the detachment was swift. Oprah's team began distancing her from projects that involved Diddy. Production notes were quietly revised. Collaborations shelved. Her inner circle was instructed. No ties, no mentions, no contact. When Cassie's lawsuit surfaced, Oprah said nothing, publicly. But insiders say she wasn't surprised. Heartbroken, yes, but not surprised. The pain was visible in her absence from certain industry events. Her sudden shift in tone during conversations about celebrity culture. Her subtle but intentional decision to amplify survivor voices even more. She had been close enough to the fire to feel the burn, but not so close that she couldn't still help put it out. And now, years later, as the world pieced together what had been hidden behind silk curtains and platinum records, the question wasn't just, what did Diddy do? But also, who knew and stayed silent? Oprah didn't stay silent. She didn't speak immediately. But when she finally did, it wasn't for clout. It was for clarity. And when the words came, they carried the weight of everything she had seen and everything the world could no longer ignore. For a woman whose empire was built on speaking truth to power, Oprah Winfrey's silence was louder than any headline. In the years following that night in Beverly Hills, the night she left Diddy's mansion early and without a word, her public relationship with him dissolved into vapor. She never addressed it directly. No public statements, no cryptic social media posts, nothing performative. But in Hollywood, silence is rarely empty. It's coded. And Oprah's absence began to speak for her. She stopped showing up to the same galas where she and Diddy had once exchanged camera-friendly smiles. She declined panel invitations that would place her in the same room with him. Even when media outlets pressed her for thoughts on hip-hop culture or celebrity moguls, her tone shifted, softer, more careful, as if she were constantly stepping around a landmine only she knew was there. Insiders noticed first. One producer who had worked with Oprah during that period told us, she looked haunted, like someone carrying a truth too big to share and too dangerous to ignore. Friends say she began vetting every invitation more carefully, asking new questions. Who would be there? What kind of security? Were there other women attending? Women she trusted? For a time she withdrew. Not from her work, her empire never stopped, but from the glittering social scene where fame and money intertwine in shadows. She poured herself into projects centered around healing, spirituality, and the voices of survivors. Her 2020 interview with the women behind the surviving R. Kelly docuseries was especially pointed, not just in what was said, but in what wasn't. Diddy's name never came up, but the parallels hung in the air like smoke. Privately, Oprah wrestled with a storm of moral conflict. She had always believed in the power of telling your truth, but this wasn't just about her anymore. Speaking publicly meant exposing a machine far bigger than one man. Diddy wasn't just a celebrity, he was an industry with ties to brands, labels, and legal teams that specialized in silence. For every woman who wanted to speak, there were 2 who had signed NDAs and 5 more who feared what might happen if they broke them. And then there was the fear. Not for her career. Oprah had transcended the need for Hollywood validation years ago, but for the people who trusted her, the women who had told her their stories in confidence, the assistants, stylists, background dancers, all shadows in Diddy's orbit, afraid of what might happen if their truths collided with his money. The emotional toll was visible in subtle shifts. She began mentioning boundaries more often in interviews. She spoke about energy, how she couldn't share space with darkness. Those who knew her best say she began praying more, walking alone early in the morning, and journaling constantly, trying to make sense of a secret too heavy for the page. There was guilt, too. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because she hadn't done more. Because she, Oprah Winfrey, the woman who could make presidents squirm and billionaires cry, hadn't found a way to speak out without burning everything down. But sometimes silence isn't cowardice. Sometimes it's strategy, survival, patience. And as more stories began to surface, lawsuits, leaked texts, whispers turned to confessions, Oprah's silence shifted into something sharper, something purposeful. She wasn't avoiding the truth. She was waiting for the world to be ready to hear it. Because when the weight of what she knew finally became too heavy to carry alone, she would no longer carry it at all. It began with a sound, muffled, distorted, but unmistakable. A recording leaked in early 2024, first on an anonymous Reddit thread, then spreading like wildfire across X, TikTok, and private Discord channels. At first, the clip was dismissed. Fake, some claimed. AI, others said. But then a second one dropped, and a third. Private audio allegedly featuring Diddy, his voice recognizable beneath the grainy static, coercing, threatening, mocking. Names were bleeped out, but not all of them. Within days, a major publication confirmed it. Diddy had quietly settled with Cassie. The lawsuit hadn't gone to trial, and now many began to suspect why. The settlement figure was sealed, but the message was loud. Silence could be bought. Evidence, however, could not be buried forever. Suddenly, the world was listening, not just to the tapes, but to the silence that followed. And the name that kept surfacing, again and again, was Oprah's. Did she know? One headline asked bluntly. Why hasn't Oprah said anything? Influencers demanded on live streams. The internet began dissecting old footage, analyzing clips from past interviews where Diddy and Oprah had crossed paths. Some pointed to her changing body language, her quiet glances. Others cited her sudden distance from hip-hop culture in recent years. But the speculation only made the pressure mount. If Oprah, the queen of empathy, the patron saint of truth-telling, knew about Diddy's alleged behavior and said nothing, what did that mean? Behind the scenes, sources say Oprah was deeply conflicted. She had been protecting others for years, women who confided in her, but weren't ready to face public scrutiny, victims whose stories were real but too fragile for the courtroom. She had wanted to shield them, not silence them. But now the world was watching, demanding, and the truth once again came knocking. She was faced with a decision that would define not just her legacy, but the next generation of survivors. Then came the letter. A private letter from a former employee in Diddy's inner circle, passed to Oprah through a mutual friend. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea. Please speak, it said. You have the platform. You always have. Some of us can't breathe until you do. That broke something open. A week later, Oprah gathered her team. No lawyers, no spin doctors, just the people she trusted most. She didn't want to make a statement. She wanted to testify. Not in court. The legal battles were not hers to fight, but in the only arena she had ever truly owned, her platform. She booked a private studio in Montecito, dimly lit, no audience, no frills, just a single camera, a chair, and a truth that had waited too long. When the camera rolled, she took a breath. No script, no teleprompter, just years of pain, clarity, and quiet rage bubbling to the surface. She didn't name every name. She didn't detail every encounter. But she said enough. She confirmed that multiple women had come to her over the years, that she had been told things in confidence, things too dangerous to repeat without consent. She said she believed them. She always had. And she said the industry made it nearly impossible to act without destroying the very people she was trying to protect. But she also said this: silence can feel like safety until it becomes betrayal. And I will not betray the women who trusted me. Not anymore. The video dropped unannounced. No trailer, no press run. It hit like an earthquake, and suddenly the world understood. Oprah had not been absent. She had been waiting for the moment when the truth could no longer be denied, only confirmed. This wasn't just a turning point. It was a reckoning, and she had chosen to step into it with open eyes and an unshaking voice. The camera fades in. There's no music, no dramatic cutaways, just a chair, a single lamp casting long shadows across the polished wood floor, and Oprah Winfrey, poised, composed, and holding something invisible but immense in her hands, the weight of too many untold stories. It's a special broadcast on OWN, announced only hours earlier, but the viewership numbers are already climbing into the millions. The title is simple, On Power and Silence. She doesn't name him, not once, but everyone knows who she's talking about. You can feel it in the gravity of each pause, the sharp edges behind every soft word. This isn't gossip. This isn't entertainment. This is a woman, a titan, drawing a line in the sand. She begins slowly, like someone walking through a dark memory, step by step. I've sat across from men who ruled nations. I've interviewed survivors of war, of genocide, of unthinkable pain. But the hardest stories to carry are the ones told in a whisper, late at night, with eyes that can't hold your gaze. She speaks of calls she received, not just one, but many, from women who worked behind the scenes, assistants, dancers, stylists, some she barely knew, some she'd never met, all of them trembling with the same question. If I tell you what happened, will anyone believe me? She pauses, then her voice lowers, but sharpens. Power without conscience is the most dangerous force in this world, and I saw it up close. There it is, the line, the indictment. She doesn't need to say the name. It echoes through the silence, because this isn't about a single man anymore. It's about a system, a culture, a sickness that hides behind fame and fortune, and how it grooms silence as effectively as it grooms its victims. She continues, her voice steady but haunted. There are faces I cannot forget, stories that still wake me in the night. I kept their trust, but I could no longer carry their truth alone. You can feel the moment the dam breaks. Social media erupts. Twitter timelines flood. TikTok stitches pop up within minutes. Influencers react with teary eyes. Celebrities repost the clip with simple captions. Respect. It's time. She said what needed to be said. But not everyone applauds. Some ask why it took so long. Others demand she say Diddy's name, that she call him out directly. But Oprah doesn't flinch. She knows the stakes. She knows the power of implication and the legalities circling like vultures above it. She ends the broadcast with a single story. A young woman who had come to her years ago, barely out of her teens, a former backup dancer. She doesn't describe what the woman said, just the feeling afterward. I remember sitting alone after she left and thinking, if I say nothing, I become part of it. But if I say something, will she be safe? It was a question she sat with for years, until now. Because in that studio, on that night, Oprah finally said something. And though she didn't point a finger, the entire world saw where she was looking. The world didn't just hear her, it erupted. Within minutes of the OWN broadcast, clips of Oprah's testimony flooded social media. A 2-minute segment where she said, "Power without conscience is the most dangerous force in this world," garnered 40 million views on TikTok in 12 hours. X, formerly Twitter, split in two. Number sign Oprah knew began trending. Fast, sharp, unforgiving. But number she spoke trended faster. Mainstream media scrambled to catch up. CNN ran with Oprah breaks silence, while Rolling Stone dissected her statements like scripture. The New York Times called it a seismic shift in the Diddy narrative. TMZ posted grainy reaction clips of celebrities at red carpet events. Most of them didn't want to speak. The silence from some of the biggest names was telling, but others, especially women, stood with her. Viola Davis reposted the clip with the caption, "There is power in finally speaking. We stand with survivors." Taraji P. Henson posted a black square with 3 words, "We believe her." Even younger voices like Keke Palmer and Janelle Monáe echoed support. But from Diddy's circle, silence, or worse, evasion. Diddy's camp released a cold, calculated statement, just 2 lines denying any wrongdoing, dismissing media speculation, and closing with a sharp legal warning: "We will pursue all options to defend against false narratives." It backfired. Brands began to run, fast. Ciroc, the brand most tied to Diddy's public identity, issued a late-night statement distancing itself from all ongoing controversies. Revolt, the network he once boasted as a black-owned empire, froze all programming related to him. Projects vanished from streaming platforms without explanation. One luxury fashion label, once proud of their Diddy collaborations, deleted every photo of him from their Instagram overnight. The empire didn't collapse in a day, but it began to bleed, quietly, relentlessly. And as one figure's kingdom dimmed, another's platform blazed brighter than it had in years. Oprah's inbox overflowed, not with brand deals or praise, but with something far heavier. Stories, hundreds, then thousands, messages from women and some men who had stayed silent until now. Assistants, interns, ex-girlfriends, makeup artists, even security personnel, all of them saying some version of the same thing. What you said gave me permission. Own servers strained. The episode was replayed millions of times. Think pieces emerged, calling Oprah's testimony a generational reckoning, likening it to the early days of the hashtag #MeToo. But this wasn't just about abuse. This was about the myth of untouchable men, and the woman who, without saying his name, had made the walls of that myth crack, one quiet word at a time. She never asked to be part of this story. Oprah Winfrey built a legacy out of listening, to others, to pain, to triumph, to truth. But this time, she wasn't the listener. She was the vessel, the echo of every whisper that had gone unheard, every voice that had been buried beneath power, fame, and fear. She didn't speak to make headlines. She spoke because silence had become unbearable. In the days that followed her broadcast, no charges were filed against Diddy. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The legal system has its limits. Slow-moving, unpredictable, often unkind to victims without power or proof. But something far deeper shifted. Reputational collapse. The illusion of invincibility, so carefully built around him over decades, was now paper-thin and burning. And for the survivors, those who had sat with their stories in silence, who had watched the world celebrate a man they knew in darkness, Oprah's words were a rupture, a release. They felt seen. One former choreographer posted, "For years, I thought I was crazy, that it didn't happen. Last night, I finally believed myself." There were no victory parades, no dramatic court scenes, just an empire losing its glow, an industry forced to reckon with the people it protects and the ones it doesn't. And Oprah? She disappeared from the spotlight again, not in shame, but in stillness. In the final moments of our story, the camera doesn't follow her into the next interview or back to a red carpet. Instead, we see her backstage. The lights are down. The applause is over. She steps off the set of her broadcast, the silence thick around her. No entourage, no teleprompter. Just her, alone for the first time in what feels like forever. She removes her mic. Her hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but release. She walks slowly down the hallway, her heels soft against the floor. No music cues, no sound bites. Just the quiet breath of a woman who carried too much for too long and finally let it go. And as the frame fades to black, one final line appears on screen. In the end, the truth doesn't knock. It kicks down the door and demands to be heard.